Ben,
Jack!
we wasn't that a fantastic transition? This is the cold open now. I have to preface this saying this is the cold open. It has nothing to do with the rest of what we're going to talk about today. But we made a film over the weekend.
We did. Wasn't that something? In
That
48
was
hours,
something.
we wrote, shot, conceived of, and edited a whole short film. A whole 3 minutes.
3 minutes of short film. Yeah, all with puppets. And this is something you do every year. Right? Am I right in thinking that?
Every year,
Every
sometimes
year?
multiple times a year. Yeah.
Wow.
Depending on how many times they make it available to do.
Yeah, and you called me up and thought, "Hey, Jack, I don't spend enough time talking to you, so would you like to help me make a puppet film over the weekend?" And I had no idea what I was getting into, but I have made films in the past, so I thought, well, sure, I'll help out, I'll join in, and I have to say, I went through all the stages of delight and misery that you go through when making a film.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted you to know that my general... I definitely fell into the Gerry Anderson camp of puppet filmmaking, which is, why do these little devils not do anything that you want them to do at
Those
the right
little
time?
so-and-sos never follow orders.
No, they don't. They don't. Yeah. So I just wanted you to know that I had a horrible time making it.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me and with our listening audience at home. I'm sure they're delighted to know what a miserable time you had.
Honestly, I enjoyed the part where we were collaborating and we were writing the story and coming up with the ideas, and watching you worked on the post-production of it and everything, and seeing the work that you were doing with it was amazing. But the bit where I had to go off by myself and shoot my sections of it with the puppet that I built from scratch, during this 48-hour challenge, that was unnecessarily stressful.
It is slightly stressful because there's the presence of a ticking clock. But you know what? It turned out really well. Your footage looked great, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. So thank you for that.
Shucks. I promise I wasn't fishing for compliments by telling that story, but I just I wanted our viewers to know that, like, we've gone through the experience of a Gerry Anderson production in 48 hours of let's make a puppet film, and
we're basically Gerry and Sylvia now, Jack.
But who's who in this in this relationship?
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
It does. Well, before anyone can speculate it, let's get into the intro.
Wow, what
Hello,
an
everyone. Welcome to the Security Hazard Show. This is our second episode, and we are coming to you live on YouTube, but also we are now available across lots of different podcast platforms as well. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Good Pods. There's lots of others as well. It just sort of just takes the feed and distributes it, and the technical setup involved with all of that. Sorry, this is probably like too much information, but like it was very interesting to me going through and like setting all of that up technically, because when we did Operation Anderthon like 5 years ago, it was a completely different process.
Yeah, the podcast ecosystem has changed a lot.
Totally changed in the last sort of 5 years or so. It's just totally different and much more streamlined. I would say it works a lot better, but I went through the process of like trying to log back into all these old accounts that I had set up for Operation Anderthon, thinking, I'll just tack an extra podcast onto that. That'll be fine. Nope. The whole ecosystem has changed. Everything you log into is all completely different. All the platforms have changed. Apple is a mess. I'm sorry, but I cannot work.
Don't say that. They're listening. They'll be removing us from their platform
They're
now.
not listening. They're not listening. Yeah, I wish they were. I wish they were.
if
This
if
is
they
the
were, maybe
problem.
they would fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But
It's true.
anyway, we're all set up and running now. So you can now
Yes.
listen to us on your favorite podcast platform of choice and also Apple Podcasts.
They said it wouldn't
Uh,
last, Jack. And we're already on episode 2.
Yes, we are on episode 2, and we've got an interesting kind of show lined up for today. Something a bit different. We are experimenting with a new I mean, everything's a new segment right now because we're still
It is.
fresh and we're still babies to all of this. But we're starting with a new segment today called War of Nerves, which is where you and I are going to have a debate. And before we get any further into it, I'm going to play your amazing intro for War of Nerves. Here it is. Right. We're fighting. We're fighting. It's you
serious.
and me. We've decided after 2 episodes, we've decided, no, you know what? We absolutely hate each other. Let's just battle it out here and now.
This rivalry will go down in history. The greatest rivalry in the Anderson fandom since Gerry and Sylvia. Oh man.
We're not getting into that. But basically, I didn't really realize I was doing this until let me tell everyone what the process was behind this episode.
Give us the backstory.
How this whole thing came about. So I was like, Ben, what do you want to do for next week's episode? And he was like, well, just as a starting point, it's going to be the 20th anniversary of the broadcast of the new Captain Scarlet episode, Trap for a Rhino. Just putting that out there as like a thought. So today, 30th of April, is the 20th anniversary of Trap for a Rhino. And I just kind of took that and ran with it and was like, right, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a debate between an episode of New Captain Scarlet, Trap for a Rhino, and a very similar episode of original Captain Scarlet. We went for Special Assignment because they've got similar themes, which we will get into. Mm-hmm. And we're going to argue the case for which is better, which is a stronger piece of television and all that sort of thing. And then there were 2 other debates that sort of naturally sprang from that. Number one is, well, one episode is very strongly about the Spectrum Rhino. The other is about the SPV. So we should compare and contrast those 2 vehicles and decide which is better and which that people prefer. But then also, whenever you talk about original Captain Scarlet and new Captain Scarlet in the same breath, you automatically start to make comparisons between the 2 and just try to decide which is better, the original or the remake. And there are strong arguments for both, which is fantastic. So we've basically got 3 debates in one here. And I put the question to our audience, out on social media about, what they preferred out of that whole selection of things. And we got a variety of different comments back. So I'm actually going to start by reading out some of our viewer comments. So to start with, Fulginator on YouTube says, Classic Scarlet is unbeatable, period. Does not expand upon that opinion any further.
No comment on
that's it.
New Captain Scarlet at all.
Nope, just nothing can beat Classic Scarlet.
Unbeatable.
So
yeah,
that's fine.
Fair enough.
Goedzui 9063. Sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation there. Says, I think I still prefer the SPV over the Rhino, but it is quite close. Not gonna lie.
Okay.
There we go. Someone somewhat sitting on the fence there.
Yeah.
And then Les Paul Davis says, Team SPV for me, though. The rear-facing driver is a cool idea, but not so good in practice. And what were those tracks at the back for? So he's saying he likes the SPV. He's Team SPV, but also look at all these flaws. I like that kind of YouTube comment. One that totally contradicts itself. Love it. It's actually really good fun. I
That's
appreciate that.
yeah, the sort of a similar approach taken to that comment as we take to our show here, Jack, where it's somewhat self-contradictory in a way,
Of course,
or
always,
at
always.
least a bit tongue in cheek.
But more importantly, Les Paul Davis also asks, more importantly, what Lego set did I buy for you last week? Because I lost the challenge last week. And I must admit, I didn't buy Ben a Lego set. But what I did do as part of our 48-hour film contest is I did build a Lego ship to go into
Oh,
our
reveal the
production.
Lego
And I
spaceship,
think I
please.
can give a preview of that if I'm not busy
Please
breaking
do.
bits
Yeah.
off of it.
While you
But
do
there we
that, I'll
go.
let people know the short film will be available from the end of May on the Cinemarionette YouTube channel, which is my YouTube channel. So go along there and subscribe so that you don't miss it when it comes out, and you can
Yeah.
see Jack's model, beautiful Lego model, on the big screen, the YouTube screen,
The YouTube screen.
in all its glory.
Yeah.
What was
That
the
is
backstory
assuming
to that model, by the way? I don't know the
that
story.
model, I
Is
mean,
that
the
a custom
basic
build
thing,
of
that's a
yours?
totally custom build because if you remember, while we were in our panic of 48-hour filmmaking, I did pull out a existing Lego set, produced by Lego, and was like, here's a
Hmm.
spaceship. And we were both like, it's okay, but it doesn't quite fit the theme of the film. So instead I was like, all right, give me 5 minutes. And I threw that one together and was just like, here, Ben, what do you think of that? It's like, great. So
Perfect.
there we go. That's how we
Yep.
came up. So there you go. That's the Lego set I sort of built for Ben, for us, for our continued
That's fair enough.
relationship as it
I will
continues
accept
to
that.
blossom.
I will accept that as payment for the debt. So consider the debt cleared.
Great, great. Well, I'm glad we solved that.
Do let
Anyway,
us know,
to
listeners / viewers, if you're interested in hearing more about that, the kind of behind the scenes of making things. We'd be happy to
yes,
talk about that more. Or if
yeah.
let us know what you like. We love to hear back from you.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got more comments about SPV versus Rhino. So
Hmm.
Andrew Clements, friend of the show,
Who?
says, "Yeah, no idea. The SPV is certainly the more iconic design and arguably the
Hmm.
more practical of the two. I worry about the Rhino's ground clearance. However, I love the Rhino's spinny chair entry method and the fact that the operator faces forward while driving is a definite plus." Yeah,
Got to get the
can't
spinny chair action.
Oh, it's much faster than that. It's I mean, you still
It's
probably break your neck.
it's whiplash inducing.
It very much whiplash inducing, yes.
Very fast.
Chris Thompson, also friend of the show. Again, who's that? I don't know. But he says that both are equally cool and flawed, but I
Hmm.
can't help but think the Rhino would have the turning circle of a train.
It does have a bit of a train kind of energy to
It's
it,
a
doesn't it?
long, it's a long boy. It's a
It's
long, long boy.
it's it's very much a widescreen friendly
Yes.
vehicle
It's
in the
made
same
for
way
widescreen.
that Zero X is, it wouldn't have worked on the small screen. It needs
Exactly. It needs
16:9
stretching.
to, to to fill out that widescreen.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And then one more. This is Simpsons Clips 24. Talking some more so about the episodes than anything else. He's saying this is
Right, yeah.
probably sacrilege, but I actually
Ooh,
prefer the new Captain Scarlet episode Trap for a Rhino. It's refreshing to
okay.
see an episode not written by Phil Ford. I have a bit of an animosity towards his writing style. Well,
Oh my.
I don't see that. I love Phil Ford's writing, but yes, the
All
Trap
right.
for a Rhino is written by John Brown, who was another great writer for New Captain Scarlet.
No relation to John Brown, puppet
I don't
sculptor.
believe so. No,
Yeah,
no,
just a
nothing to do with the original Thunderbird sculptor. No. So, Ben,
that was a great batch of comments. Thank you for reading those out.
yes, thank you all so much for sharing your comments. We love to read them, and we love seeing your little notes coming through in the chat as well. Whenever we see those, we try and keep an eye on them as well. If you're tuning in live, then that's your opportunity to kind of come and say hello. Now, there are so many different ways we can approach this debate.
Yes.
And I think at a high level, let's start with an overview of original Captain Scarlet versus new Captain Scarlet, because I don't
Right.
think you can't really talk about one without comparing it to the other.
No.
Um,
Well, the
what?
new in the title really, I mean, if you're going to call something new old thing, new brackets old thing, then you're
Yeah.
inviting comparison, aren't you? You know,
Yes.
they could have
Yes.
just called it Captain Scarlet or, Captain Scarlet and something, and it would have been less. But to say, oh, it is new Captain Scarlet, instant comparison.
Very, very unusual. Very unusual. But I don't know. It's actually funny to me. Obviously, the show is now 20 years old, so it
It
does feel
is.
very odd to call it New Captain Scarlet. But at the same time, I had no problem accepting that.
No, I didn't either. I think for both of us being about the right age for it when it came out, it didn't seem to a young person watching it, it didn't seem strange that it was called New Captain Scarlet because it was
Right.
new and it was Captain Scarlet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at the time it didn't seem strange, but as an adult looking back, I think that's kind of a like I just said, you're inviting people to contrast it with the original.
Yeah. But I have to say, and obviously, I did take the side of Trap for a Rhino in the debate, but my thoughts extend to the whole series, where New Captain Scarlet is one of the best examples of any TV remake ever.
Wow.
It's certainly up there with new, again, new Doctor Who, even though it was 20 years ago that it started, but around about that same time as well. Again,
Yeah.
it invites comparison because they happen so close together. But yeah, New Captain Scarlet for me is it takes everything that's great about the original Supermarionation series and pokes and prods at it, and kind of what I like about that approach to a remake is it took the whole series apart and put it back together again in a slightly different way, and sort of modified each individual bit to still form a great kind of cohesive thing.
Mm.
And I wonder what kind of made that as successful as it was, whether it was the fact that Gerry was involved in both, or whether he had just assembled the perfect team of people around him to make that reboot kind of work as well as it did, whether there was the right level of respect for the original versus, wanting to do something new and different with it. It's obviously going to be a kind of a combination of all of those things, but
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that's my take on New Captain Scarlet. It's perfect, and I obviously have a lot of fondness for it. I have nostalgia for it because I was there. I was there 20 years ago. I was 10 years old when it first came out, and the experience of watching it on Ministry of Mayhem on a Saturday morning with Stephen Mulhern and Holly Willoughby there doing their
Sometimes in costume,
shtick,
no less.
sometimes in costume. I was like, as much as obviously the ITV did not treat the show very well. I think
No.
that is standard opinion across the board. But it seemed like Ministry of Mayhem, at least, had some idea of what they had on their hands, but they were obligated to treat it in the way that they did. But
Sure.
they did their best within those
Considering
restrictions.
within what the restrictions were that they had to
Yeah.
work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was there with a VHS 2005, so still just about using a VHS for this stuff. I was
Yeah, yeah.
recording the episodes as they went out and would go back and rewatch those VHS tapes, picked up the DVDs, and now the lovely shiny Blu-ray release
Isn't
from
that
Network,
gorgeous?
which is again very interesting to look at, see all the CGI from 20
Yeah.
years ago in high definition. Some of it's held up really well, some of it maybe hasn't, and we'll go into that when we talk about
I'm sure we
Trap for
will
a
talk
Rhino.
about that.
But
Curious
anyway,
about
yeah,
your VHS recording process. So obviously with Ministry of Mayhem, the big controversy there for folks who don't know, the series was kind of chopped up a little bit. Were you
hmm.
trying to catch were you like pausing stopping and starting, or did you just record the whole block of Ministry of
I
Mayhem?
was trying to get the whole thing. So it was only split into 2 halves, if I remember correctly. So, which is how it would have been broadcast. Anyway, if it had been a primetime slot, there would have been a gap for adverts. So I never quite. But the thing that bugged people about that was more that it wasn't just a standard advert break. It would be like several minutes of Stephen and Holly doing their thing, and then there'd be an advert break, and then maybe there'd be another segment, and then the second half of New Captain Scarlet would start. So yeah, I was pausing my recording. I really just wanted to capture the New Captain Scarlet episode itself. So I would quite often lose the beginning few seconds because, again, it would just start. They didn't give it much introduction. They gave it a bit of an introduction, but not much. So it would be quite sporadic. So I would watch the entire. And I was 10 years old at the time, so it was kind of in my wheelhouse anyway to watch Ministry of Mayhem. That kind of wasn't that unusual. But I would watch through the whole, what was it, like 3 hours in the morning, sit down and enjoy Ministry of Mayhem with my.
At what time was that?
I think it started around about 9 a.m. in the morning and finished probably about 12 o'clock. So it was a whole morning of Saturday morning TV.
You didn't have to get up at the crack of dawn, though, to try to sneak it.
And I can actually have it written down. So Track for a Rhino, for example, went out. It started at 10:54 a.m. Thank you to the authorized Gerry Anderson episode guy for having that written down. Yeah. So it was, it wasn't the ideal viewing experience by any means, but I remember it fondly. The one thing that did grind my gears a lot about it was I had managed to catch promo for the first series starting. I think CITV had run some sort of trailer for it. But the second series, the second batch of 13 that they broadcast, I had no idea had started. And I missed the first probably 4 or 5 of them when those started broadcasting again. Because there was a gap of, I don't know, 6 months or so. And at that point, I must admit, I didn't keep watching Ministry of Mayhem when New Captain Scarlet wasn't on. I wasn't that much of a fan. Interesting fact, though. Oh, wow. Sorry, I realize I'm taking over here, but
No, welcome to the Tangent Podcast.
So, I love this. So, when I was 10 years old, when New Captain Scarlet was on, Ministry of Mayhem was filmed at my local TV studio, which was the Maidstone Studios, which I want to say is no longer there, or half of it's been converted into a block of flats or something. Anyway, the Maidstone Studios, and by weird coincidence, I was in the Cub Scouts, and we had been invited, our little Cub Scout troop had been invited to appear on another Stephen Mulhern children's TV show called Tricky TV, which was a magic show because Stephen Mulhern, among his many other presenting talents, is also a magician. And so he did a whole magic show. And although the segment that we appeared in it wasn't filmed at the Maidstone Studios, but the day started by us all getting on a bus at the Maidstone Studios. And so I got a tour of the Ministry of Mayhem set during the time that New Captain Scarlet was on the air. Obviously, the show itself wasn't actually on at the time. And then I got to spend the day with Stephen Mulhern, who famously dressed up as Captain Scarlet during those New Captain Scarlet segments.
That's extraordinary, Jack. What a opportunity for a young Captain Scarlet fan to be there at the set where the Ministry of Mayhem
the show was being butchered.
Right, yeah.
It was still, like going to the slaughterhouse.
But still a nice opportunity to connect with it in a personal way.
In a very weird way.
There's something interesting about, people talk a lot about the optimal viewing experience, especially with movies. It's like, oh, you have to go see a movie in theaters. You can't watch a movie on your phone. That's ridiculous. People want to optimize. And that's all good. I'm very much in favor of, go support your local cinema, go places where there's good sound and good picture. But at the same time, the some of the weirdest or the most wonderful like media experiences can be in a context where you're like, what? Like, why did I watch that on VHS at a friend's house? And the tape was damaged but that becomes part of the memory, and that sometimes those challenges become part of the experience of watching it and make you more interested in the thing that you're watching. For example, so I'll segue here into old Captain Scarlet if you'll let me.
Yes, please do. Please do.
The So I first became aware last week. I talked about Thunderbirds and how I first encountered that. I first became aware of the fact that there were other Gerry Anderson shows because there was an advertisement for other DVDs from A&E, the American releases of the Gerry Anderson shows. And the show that they advertised first was Captain Scarlet, because obviously that's one of the more popular ones. But I didn't have the Captain Scarlet DVDs. And so the first time that I saw an episode of Captain Scarlet would have been through a thing called Anderson TV. And Anderson TV is long since defunct.
Wow.
But it was essentially a pirate web channel using embedded WMV feeds.
Yes.
And they would show every week it would rotate out what episodes were available to watch. And it would be one episode of each Gerry Anderson show. I think up to Lavender Castle, I want to say.
It had
maybe even New Captain Scarlet.
I might be remembering a later version of it, but I think it did have New Captain Scarlet on there. And I also remember it had things like Space Police, the pilot for Space Police. That's how I first saw that.
Yep.
Probably The Investigator as well.
Yep.
Dare I say? Yeah.
Probably.
Wow.
Lots
That's
of
a website that
lots of oddities. And in those days, I still had dial-up internet. So I would actually get a ride to the local library that had a faster connection. So I would have watched Captain Scarlet for the first time on a library computer on a pirated website in a little tiny WMV file, standard definition, but I have a lot of nostalgia for watching stuff that way. Obviously not an ideal viewing situation. And I didn't get to see the full series of Captain Scarlet until much later because I didn't have the DVDs. So
and we should now also add, please do buy official releases of all these Gerry Anderson shows. That's very important.
We're not advocating for piracy.
No, we're not. But at the time, we were literally children and were so desperate for new material. That
I was confused. I was trying to find myself. Please don't arrest me.
yeah. But yeah, you're right. Those very unique viewing experiences do add to the appeal of it. And
things like Ministry of Mayhem are sort of, I imagine, I don't know this, maybe there's not, but I speculate that there are kids who watched it that way, for whom
I know at least one person who is not a Gerry Anderson fan, but who did watch New Captain Scarlet on Ministry of Mayhem and enjoyed it and would see it week to week. But they weren't a Gerry Anderson fan. They weren't tuning in for New Captain Scarlet, but they remember watching it. Because I imagine, as people frequently point out, it did stand out because it was so different to what else was going on. I mean, you had pie throwing contests, you had sort of pretty standard cartoons going out, and then New Captain Scarlet would come on, and it was this impressive CGI production that looked expensive, took itself very seriously, and had moments of pure violence.
It did.
That did stand out in that time slot, I will say that.
Yeah, it's funny to think about it now, but it was considered, by me at least, very cutting edge. I mean, it looks sort of like PlayStation 2 graphics now at times.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, the motion capture aspect of it, and the kind of like they were really kind of experimenting and trying something new, which is very much in the spirit of Gerry Anderson right up to his last show there. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Well, we're now supposed to be talking about the SPV versus the Rhino.
yes, a very
And
interesting discussion actually, because they're sort of evenly matched in a
they're
way.
quite evenly matched. And Ben, you you actually made a spreadsheet, didn't you?
I did because I'm such a nerd, Jack. I
Yeah.
just couldn't resist the opportunity to whip out a spreadsheet about
Yeah.
these two
To
science
compare
fiction
the
vehicles.
stats side by side, I think I have to admire there is no better way of doing it. So go on then, argue your case for the SPV.
Right. I think what makes the SPV, I'm going to borrow a little bit of some arguments from viewers inevitably
Hmm.
because it's an iconic design. You know, it's sort of got a uniqueness about it where it doesn't look like anything else. It's like part tank, ground vehicle. It's got it's trailblazing in its aspect with its wheels, with its caterpillar tracks. It's those little unique things like the caterpillar tracks. According to some of the TV 21
Hmm.
ancillary material, it's actually amphibious, which we don't
Yeah.
see in the show.
No, nor do we see those caterpillar tracks actually in operation either.
No,
Pretty
not
sure.
really, not really.
No.
So it's got all these unique features. It's driven in the rear, or facing rear facing driving,
Hmm.
which was a pioneering concept.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
could call it pioneering. You could also call it a massive mistake.
well, that's what Gerry Anderson called it. But it's one of those things that just people just remember it. You know, it's such a unique idea, and that's sort of emblematic. The SPV is sort of emblematic of Captain Scarlet as a whole because it's such a unique show. There's really nothing else you can like. Is it a superhero show? It defies classification, and the SPV is sort of similar in
Hmm.
that it doesn't exactly neatly fall into the box of like, well, it's a armored ground vehicle, but it doesn't neatly fit into the box of any other
Right.
ground vehicle.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, great toy design, great piece of merchandise, as
I
you can
can't
see
argue with
from
it. It is a good toy. And it has been done in so many different toy forms. I have at least like 3 or 4 different versions just on the shelves behind me. It was done a lot of times, and it has a lot of key features that appear again and again on different toys. But in terms
and
of in universe, how those functions actually kind of work for me, yeah, yeah, it's all
yeah,
right.
I will
It's all
say
right.
it does not have nearly the armaments of the Rhino. It is
Well,
much more simply aligned, but I
of,
think
of,
the kind of simplicity is actually kind of a strength. It doesn't go over the top. It's a manageable piece of kit that you can actually see someone driving and using practically in a situation. And it has
yes,
the classic secrecy element too, where they're hidden at locations around the world. And this is
yeah,
something that came up when I was watching with my nieces and nephews. I was like, and an SPV could be hidden anywhere. So you could just be walking around. You could be at school and looking out, across the field and see a building over there. It could contain an SPV, or like you could be at the gas station. There could be an SPV over there. So they can be anywhere. The SPV, they're hidden all over
yeah.
the world, which is a bit costly, but
I
definitely
was going
worth
to
it. So
say,
you have
in a
a
real
lot of
world
SPVs.
sense, not very efficient because whilst you could simultaneously have an SPV anywhere, you could also not have it in the place where you need it.
True.
Whilst
True.
they are, I'm sure, strategically positioned all over the place, which, as you said, very, very wasteful because most of the time they're not being used at all. Um, yeah, you may have one not in the place where you want it. Now,
Right.
I agree that from a some of that magic is lost in New Captain Scarlet, where instead of being positioned all over the world, the rhinos are just dropped off by an albatross wherever they're needed, which very, very practical, very sensible. but maybe doesn't quite have the same charm and appeal. I agree. There was a certain appeal in the original Captain Scarlet series of where's the SPV gonna come out of this week? You know, what's it hidden inside?
I take that as a concession that you think I'm right, and I'll accept that victory.
No, not entirely. I agree in that aspect. Well, it depends on what way you're looking at it. As a viewing experience, yes, it's more entertaining to have the SPV pop up out of nowhere.
Right.
But in terms of practicality, it's much more practical to have the Rhino just be transported to where you need it, and that's the end of it. But in terms of the statistics, or at least the statistics we have available to compare the two vehicles, you know, the Rhino is bigger. It has many more armaments. I mean, just to compare, the SPV has a ground-to-air rocket launcher, whereas the Rhino has 2 front-mounted twin cannons, harpoon guns, magnetic grabs, extendable battering rams, rear-facing missile defense. Like, there's so much more going on, and
it's
indeed,
just too much, Jack. It's just an overload of weaponry. I mean, you know, it's what do you? It's not you only have so many hands to push buttons and to drive this thing.
But that's the other thing that's really neat about the Rhino is the front-facing cabin, so that your driver does not get vertigo and throw up all over the seat while they're driving.
But what happens when you crash, Jack? You're gonna go straight into the screen right in front of you.
Sure. I mean,
inertia is working against you.
But that said, the immediate thing I think of is the original Scarlet episode, Winged Assassin, where Scarlet ends up with a really nasty head wound after he crashes his SPV, despite the fact that it's a rear-facing design. So I really don't think it saves them that much. I mean, ideally, they wouldn't crash the thing. And that's the thing that the Rhino has in its favor, is it has many more defenses to keep it intact. And as we see in Trap for a Rhino, it lasts until the bitter end.
That is true.
Keeps on moving. Whereas SPVs, you're crashing them every 5 seconds.
You are.
I feel like.
Do either of these vehicles, new Captain Scarlet or original, do they come with airbags? I mean, this is not a family-friendly vehicle. I wouldn't take my kids in either of these.
No, I mean, for one thing, but then you come onto seating capacity, which I have to admit, the SPV has it beat. The SPV has 3 seats. The Rhino has 2.
I feel like you could squeeze more. I mean, the Rhino is such a chonk. It's such a big boy. You could stick a few more seats in there theoretically,
but you couldn't safely seat. You wouldn't take your family to the beach in a Rhino. I feel like
there's no airbags anyway. So yeah. But
safety
in the safety department, they both are a little bit lacking, I think.
Well, they both stink.
Yeah.
But that's not really the point, is it? I mean, they're kind of designed to be quite unsafe. Because that's the whole spectacle, of course, is when they do crash and when they do go wrong. And
yes,
and boy, oh boy, does the SPV go wrong plenty of times.
It does. But it's such a, it goes back to what I was saying before. It's part of it is the charm of the thing. Like you can't beat it for style and for the secret. Like, I mean, I would argue maybe even second only to Thunderbird 2 in terms of fan favorites. It's just such an iconic design. It's an easy candidate for one of the greatest.
What I will say on that is, if you were to ask a child to do a drawing of the SPV versus the Rhino, the SPV has a much bolder, kind of clearer. Its shape is much more distinctive, and I think that would probably be the favorite as far as that is concerned. So I can agree that to a child, the SPV probably would have more appeal for that reason.
But the Rhino has a bit of an edge in speed. We don't know the exact speed, but I'm gonna concede that it's probably faster.
2 jet engines strapped to the back of it, so I think it's pretty quick. And as we see in Trap for a Rhino,
It's very
The Falcon
fast.
Interceptor and the Hummingbird have trouble keeping up with it.
They do. This is a
So
very fast machine.
it does move quick. But then again, you do come back round to, well, it's so long, as Chris Thompson suggested in his comment, it probably moves like a train, in which case you probably can't drive it that fast because you would never make it round a corner.
Right. Yeah, that in this episode, Trap for a Rhino, it's very much a straight shot, which, there's not too many sharp
Works for
curves
its
that it has to go
advantage.
around, and that works to its advantage for sure.
Yeah. No, I can't argue with that. So, well, it's hard to necessarily draw a conclusion as to which is the best. They both have their merits.
They're both pretty great, I have
Well,
to say.
what I have to say I really do like is the fact that they are so different. Although
Yeah,
the Rhino clearly performs the same sort of function as
they're
an
clearly the
SPV.
same. They're meant to be the same vehicle in a sense.
Yeah,
But they do have unique features, and they open possibilities for unique stories like the ones that we're about to talk about.
yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. So let's get into that then. Do you want to start with special assignments? That was
Sure.
your episode that you're arguing the case for. So tell
My
me
special
a little
assignment.
bit about special assignment.
Right. Well, special assignment opens with a filling station attendant getting run over by Captain Black so that he can disconnect the brakes on the car of two gentlemen who end up becoming Mysteron agents. It's a bit of a confusing opening to me because why couldn't Captain Black just kill the filling station attendant and
Yeah.
disconnect the brakes himself? Uh,
So the interesting thing is, remembering from again Chris Bentley's Gerry Anderson episode guide,
hmm,
that those scenes were not originally in the script
right.
for the episode. Though they were
That's
added
true.
later.
Yeah,
So I wonder whether that has something to do with it. But it's a very memorable moment when
it is.
Black runs over the
Shane Rimmer
attendant.
voices the attendant, and his vocal performance. He's best known as Scott Tracy, of course, but his vocal performance always adds extra drama to whatever situation he's in.
Yeah.
But yes, we get the Mysteron threat. They're going to destroy North America. They don't say how. In the present emergency, most leave is canceled, but two agents will be allowed to take a vacation during this time anyway, apparently. And the the special assignment in question is given to Captain Scarlet in secret by Colonel White. Nobody else knows.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and so Captain Scarlet, being given this special assignment, immediately goes on leave with Captain Blue. They go to a casino,
As if
and
they didn't spend enough time together.
they also
You know.
like to hang out. It's yeah, they decide to go to the casino together, which is a bit of an odd thing in and of itself. Although I will say, Gerry Anderson mentioned, I think in the Stingray audio commentary, how hard they worked to create a sense of off-duty uh, life for the characters.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that separates Gerry Anderson shows from Roberta Lee, or even something like Starfleet, where there's not really. I mean, Shiro is always wearing his helmet. The main character in Starfleet wears his
Yeah.
helmet even to bed. So to see them in evening wear at the table playing roulette,
It is
it's
nice.
kind of fun. It's kind of fun that
Yeah.
they
It's one of the
exist
things about
outside
Captain
of the
Scarlet, though.
context.
It's one of the things about Captain Scarlet, though, is being on cloud base 24/7 must always feel like being at work. Even if you're sat in
Yeah,
that lounge and everything, you know. Whereas Tracy Island, it like feels like, okay, this is
more
home.
homey.
Even
Yeah,
Marineville has a homey feel, but cloud base doesn't really have
no,
any of that.
no, I would have a hard time relaxing in that lounge for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Captain Blue and Captain Scarlet down on Earth. They're not on Cloud Base. Captain Scarlet is gambling heavily, and Captain Blue tries to stop him, but he can't. And then Captain Scarlet gets in over his head and gets into debt, which leads to him being relieved of his duties for Spectrum because it's against regulations for a Spectrum agent to gamble, I suppose, which is a bit odd given some things that happen later. But dismissed from Spectrum, he goes to a hotel where the guys who were killed in the opening sequence, they've been tracking him and following him. Not sure how they do this. I am theorizing here that they have some sort of a mole on Cloudbase who knows where the Spectrum agents go on their leave.
Really?
Well,
I think the Mysterons could get away with that.
I mean, who knows? They're the Mysterons. They can get away with anything.
Well, they might also just know because they're Mysterons, and who knows what their powers are. They seem to, again, depending on what the plot requires, they probably can just sort of guess.
True. But in this case, the plot requires them to know where Captain Scarlet is. They know that he has gambling debts, and they use that leverage that he owes money and that he's, out of Spectrum to force him into helping them requisition an SPV, which they then plan to use to destroy Nuclear City, which is in the American Southwest.
Which is,
I think, in Arizona. Yeah, just building a whole city dedicated to nuclear power. Something in both of these episodes that's a bit like, seems like a potential security risk, particularly in the context of a Gerry Anderson show.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, so they've recruited Captain Scarlet. He gets wind of what the full mission is and puts up a show of resistance, like he doesn't want to participate. They force him into participating, and he decides to go on their side. And there's a pretty dramatic scene where he appears to kill Captain Blue, his friend, who came looking for him.
Yeah.
Captain Blue.
Because Captain Blue doesn't buy the premise in the same way that we at home don't really buy the premise that Scarlet's just given up.
It has to be said. Well, I'll save my conclusions for the end. So Captain Blue is shot by Captain Scarlet. Captain Scarlet and the two Mysteron agents leave to go destroy Nuclear City. But Captain Blue wakes up again and discovers he was only hit with a stun gun. So don't worry, people at home, if you were stressing about the death of Captain Blue, don't worry. He's still alive, at least for now. The SPV that they requisition, thanks to a punch from Captain Scarlet, is hurtling towards Nuclear City. Captain Blue almost rumbled the secret plan that Colonel White devised to basically create a trap for the Mysterons. Captain Scarlet was never on the side of the Mysterons. He just shot Captain Blue with a stun gun to make it look like he was on their side. And as he's hurtling towards Nuclear City, he sets off a flare so that or a smoke trail rather, to let the Angels know that this is this SPV is not up to any good. They're like, smoke, bad.
As if SPVs didn't have enough, they seem pretty self-destructive by themselves. So the fact that it literally has a setting that's like, come and blow me up, please. Just takes the biscuit, really. But there you go.
It's a big target right on the back of it.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. So they start shooting. Captain Scarlet gets shot when they realize that he set off the smoke trail. He ejects. The Angels blow up the SPV in spectacular fashion, and it's a great explosion. Of course, Captain Scarlet sustains mortal injuries, but recovers. The Nuclear City is saved, of course, because the SPV has been exploded, which I guess doesn't really say very much for the resilience of the SPV that you can destroy it with an Angel interceptor. But I digress.
Yeah.
The episode concludes with a nice moment where everyone's in the casino. I say everyone: Colonel White, Captain Blue, Captain Scarlet, and Lieutenant Green are all taking leave in this casino. Even though Captain Scarlet says, I never gamble. They're all there. Lieutenant
Yeah.
Green has worked out a system for roulette, but Captain Scarlet won't use it because he's an upstanding guy. That is roughly what happens in Special Assignment. I find this premise absolutely crackers because the Mysterons would never, because he was formerly a Mysteron agent anyway, it sort of makes this whole
Right.
thing idea that he might somehow abandon one side and switch to the other. They don't play on that former status of him being a Mysteron in the pilot at
Right.
all. It's set up as a total, he's turned traitor just from almost like the episode Marineville Traitor, where
Mm.
Commander Shore is suspected of being a traitor. They play it like that, like he's turning traitor for the first time. So it doesn't have it feels incongruous in fitting with that history that we know about the character by this point in the show. This is episode 10 in production order, I think 14 in broadcast order. So it's pretty far in.
Yeah.
Pretty far in at this point. So the premise itself doesn't quite work for me. The SPV, it's great to have some screen time from a cool vehicle. I always love to see where they're hiding it.
That is a
filling,
particularly memorable one when he punches the guy.
It is.
So I like the way it subverts that, because you're very, again, because we're so far into the series, you're very used to, show your identification, right? Show the ID that it subverts that quite nicely.
It does.
I mean, it doesn't say much for Spectrum security that, if you don't have an ID, you can just punch the attendant in the face, and that will also get you access to an SPV. So it's not very good. But, it's a memorable moment.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that was a planned leak. But it doesn't quite. The pieces of the puzzle don't quite fit together. I will say the kind of opening sequence that I criticized earlier is really well done. It's got some great mystery elements, some kind of horror elements. The guy being run over. It's just not a good. The Captain Scarlet universe is not a good place if you like to work on cars. You're just basically doomed to be a target by
something of a preoccupation of the writers. Is how can we murder people with vehicles this week?
And this is written by Tony Barwick, so make of that what you will. A good episode, not a great one because of some of the problems, but some spectacular action sequences with the SPV at the end. And some, I think it's a good idea. I think it could have worked better if it had been a different main character other than Captain Scarlet. If perhaps in the new Captain Scarlet era, when they were focusing more on some of the other captains, like this would make a great story to remake with the new Captain Scarlet era. Captain Ochre, I think she would have been an excellent character to do this kind of a story with. So some real potential, but kind of an incomplete thought in a way.
In terms of the actual attack on Nuclear City, do we actually see Nuclear City at all?
We don't. We do not. We see a lot of desert, which is a bit disappointing. It is a bit disappointing not to hear about a place like Nuclear City.
It sounds
the
amazing,
sort of thing. The sort of thing that you see when you read TV21. Like if you read the comics, then
it is a very TV21 idea, isn't it?
It is. But it doesn't actually turn up, so that it's a bit disappointing. And it actually reminds me of a later Tony Barwick thing, Badwater County. It's like this sort of desert landscape in Terrahawks, and it it just feels like that kind of a world where they're just cruising around and there's nothing around for miles, and it's just a bunch of sand. And you're like, this is the budget that they had. Their budget for Nuclear City was only enough to produce a nice backdrop and some sand.
Right, exactly. But as a result of that, the threat doesn't feel very. I mean, bearing in mind the Mysteron threat at the start of the episode is we will destroy North America. It's very difficult to link that idea to a single SPV driving through the desert. It just doesn't quite go together. That's a common problem in a lot of the Supermarionation shows, actually. We were talking about it with Trapped in the Sky, where it would have been nice in Trapped in the Sky to see inside the Fire Flash and see the passengers being thrown around during that. Same thing with Nuclear City and Special Assignment. Would have been great to, at least see some buildings, see some people getting worried about what was going to happen. Maybe seeing this SPV coming towards it.
We do see. I think I might be telling a lie. I think we do see briefly
like the front gates. Maybe?
Yeah, we see like a
Okay.
one building because Captain Oker, I think, is there, and he talks to the director.
Oh, right.
It's very brief.
Yeah.
So a bit disappointing, but it's so as an analog to what we talked about in Trapped, or an analogy for what we talked about in Trapped in the Sky. It's sort of the equivalent of showing Tintin at the beginning of the episode, but then when she's actually in jeopardy, they don't cut back to her.
Right.
They don't cut back to Nuclear City at all beyond that one shot that's so brief that I even forgot about it, having just watched the episode right before the stream.
Yeah, but that's I mean that does say it all, really. And the other problem with that sort of desert landscape that they're driving through is it is quite similar to a lot of other desert landscapes that they drive through. Like, immediately I kind of mix up bits of Special Assignment with things like Fire at Rig 15, which is the same sort of thing. And so
also there's the element of gambling in a children's show. It's just in general in Supermarionation shows, there's always
I mean, that's just a 60s TV thing anyway.
It is.
Like, there's rarely an ITC show that doesn't take place in a casino. I feel like there's always at least a scene.
It's just odd. It doesn't quite fit for me for some reason. I guess in Thunderbirds, they have their sort of casino episode, which would be the Duchess Assignment. But you have the character of the Duchess, who's like a gambling addict, and it sort of makes more sense.
It's played for comedy, whereas in Scarlet, it's like played totally straight. And even the way I think about those casino scenes, they're lit very dark, and there isn't the same grandeur that it's given in the Duchess Assignment. It's sort of made to feel quite seedy, which is sort of the point, because they're trying to suggest, Captain Scarlet shouldn't really be doing this.
Yeah,
so
and that is a nice aspect of the episode that we haven't talked about yet, is the kind of grubbiness. There's like an almost film noir shot, which someone I was talking to recently said it was one of their favorite shots in Captain Scarlet altogether, where Scarlet is just kind of sitting in the window of his hotel room looking at a flashing green neon sign that says bar.
Yeah.
And it feels very like film noir. It feels very kind of cinematic. And it's they do a great job of creating a world, a mise en scène for their characters to inhabit. It's just a shame the premise doesn't really support. The premise is a bit flimsy to support the weight of all that.
Yeah, it just sort of happens. It would have been nice if because it's supposed to show Scarlet at his sort of lowest point, and we're supposed to recognize it as like, hey, this is different. This isn't what usually happens in a Scarlet episode. He's normally the hero. Why is he down so low? But we maybe needed to build to that point rather than just sort of being handed it. Like, oh, you're fired. So Scarlet's immediate first thought isn't, I'll go see my parents, or I'll, go and, stay somewhere nice. Like, no, I'm going to spend the least amount of money possible and stay in the grubbiest hotel room I can find.
If Scarlet had been an hour-long show like Thunderbirds, they would have had more time to kind of develop that and make it more credible. But as it is, it's just like we feel like Adam does, as you say, that it doesn't make sense for Scarlet.
And you only know in hindsight, he was put there because he was trying to draw out those Mysteron agents, and he probably, again, in the same way the Mysterons knew where Scarlet would be, Scarlet knew where the Mysteron agents were. It's kind of, again, just for the purposes of getting the plot going. No, I appreciate that, but yeah. It's
It's an odd
interesting
one,
because
but it's
I
it's
had often held this episode in fairly high regard just because it does do something different. It does,
Mhm.
try to deceive the audience into thinking that one thing's happening, but it's actually another. And I do like that. I think that's clever. But yeah,
Yeah.
as you say, it maybe just needed a little more refinement to get it to make it more memorable, to make it stand out.
Yeah.
So I
It's
think
a
that's
it's a
fair
solid
enough.
middle of the road episode. It has some good points. It has some weaknesses, but it's an entertaining. There's no episode of Captain Scarlet that's not entertaining to watch. So
Right.
um,
Right.
it's a good one.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Fair enough. Well,
Now
I
tell me
kind of
about
land there.
tell me about a trap for a rhino.
Trap for a
How do you
rhino.
trap a rhino?
How do you trap? Well, first of all, interesting bit of trivia. Again, thanks to the Gerry Hansen episode guide. The title of this episode originally was actually "Trap for a Cheetah," and the whole thing would have actually revolved around one of the red cheetah sports cars. It's not a sports car; it's got a bit more utility than that, but it's a very different type of vehicle to the Rhino. But they changed it to a Rhino, and the setting is a nuclear power station in the Highlands of Scotland. And there is an old lady living in a cottage up on the hill, which overlooks this very big, very impressive nuclear complex. Contrary to what we were saying about Nuclear City in Special Assignment, we get to look at the whole, I think it's called the Grampian Nuclear Power Station. We see the whole thing. It looks huge. It's impressive. It's got this massive reactor dome in the middle of it, and it looks imposing. It looks impressive. And up on the hill, there is this cottage. The old lady lives in the cottage, and I was thinking, oh, that poor lady. That nuclear power station probably wasn't there when she first moved into the cottage.
There's a whole prequel where she has to fight for her land rights, and they're trying to
Yeah,
force her
she's
out, but
like
she won't
going up to the council office, and it's like, no, you can't build that in front of you. You're going to ruin my house value by building a nuclear power station right next door to my cottage. How dare you?
It's a whole different drama.
Yeah, yeah. But you can imagine maybe there were more houses around and they knocked them all down, but she insisted on staying. Even though, yeah, the massive debt. I mean, she's got this hunchback and she's like having trouble standing up straight. Like living next to a power station is not doing great things for her. Anyway, she sees a green cloud appear in the sky and shine a light all over the power station. And, is immediately like, oh, what's that? Of course, us as the audience, we know, Mysterons. Right, they're up to something there. She phones up the police to make a report. They don't take it very seriously at all. They write her off. Throughout the episode, she is written off as a drunk who enjoys a glass of whiskey every now and again. But the Mysteron influence then comes down her chimney, which is quite amusing if you think about it too hard. It's kind of Santa, but the opposite. Comes down her chimney and just sort of overwhelms her. And this is something
Mhm.
that in New Captain Scarlet is a little less. It's actually not as clearly defined as it is in the original series. In the original series, the rule is the Mysterons in some way engineer a situation that kills their victim so that they can then turn them into a Mysteron agent. Whereas in New Captain Scarlet, the Mysterons can just sort of appear. Their green energy can just sort of turn up and take over and kill someone. And that's how the episode kicks off in dramatic fashion. And immediately what strikes me about this episode is we're in a very different sort of setting. It's quite
Yeah.
a distinctive, that Scottish Highland setting with all the countryside around it is very distinctive. It makes for a different type of episode. And similar to Special Assignment, it sort of comes at a point in the series where we're sort of established. We know what's going on. We know who the characters are. So it's time to start doing something a little bit different. And I think this does as good a job as any to kind of set all of that up. Meanwhile, speaking of doing something different with the characters. Harmony Angel, who has always sort of been a secondary character to the series, always sort of playing second fiddle to Destiny. But Harmony is working at the nearby Spectrum Flight Training School, where Spectrum cadets are trained on different, Spectrum aircraft and things like that. And she's working there, sort of teaching a class. And this guy turns up, while she's waiting for her flight home to Skybase, I should say, not Cloudbase, Skybase. And this guy comes up to her and is sucking up like nobody's business. He is even before he gets Mysteronized, I don't like the guy. He comes across very slimy. But anyway, that's Cadet Johnson. And he comes along and it's like, oh, I really love working on the Angel, the Falcon simulator, and oh, that was really great. I had such a great time with that. And you go, yeah, that's nice. Can you leave me alone, please? Anyway, meanwhile, Colonel White and Captain Scarlet are up on Skybase, and they have heard about Mrs. Mackenzie, the old lady, and her report of seeing a UFO above the power station. And Colonel White's like, we should probably investigate that. That sounds like a Spectrum thing to be on top of.
Smells like a rat.
Yeah,
which rat.
Again, I think is great. I think that's exactly the sort of thing. Spectrum in New Captain Scarlet feels much more like it has a finger in every pie, that they're listening to everything, that they have the operational ability to monitor every situation that's going on. So
they have their own John Tracy.
Exactly. When there is a UFO incident that comes up, anything, it is worthy of investigation. I think that's great.
I agree.
But I also do like the fact that they don't necessarily treat it with the utmost urgency at first. They're like, well, let's go in gently. Harmony's working nearby. We'll just send her along to go and have a look. Meanwhile, Scarlet is deployed in an Albatross to go and take a Rhino to the area, just in case, just to have it ready. And I really love the launch sequence that you get for the Albatross. The fact it's just dropped straight out of the bottom of Skybase is just unusual. It takes something that you wouldn't have seen in the original TV series, in the original Supermarionation series, and just like, oh, what if we had craft launch out of the bottom as well as the top? Why not? Let's do that. So I think that's
sort of combines the like Thunderbird 2 pod vehicle energy with the SPV nicely, where it's like, oh yeah, it would be nice to have a heavy transporter that could just take that anywhere. It's a nice, and it's a nice sequence.
Yeah. What I like about the Albatross is it's a carrier craft, but it's not like a huge bulky cargo plane or something like that. It is just about big enough to carry a Rhino, and that's it. And I kind of like that. It makes it feel nimble but also big and impressive at the same time.
Yeah. So is there a toy of the Albatross? Is there a model?
Is there a toy? Almost certainly, yes. I think so. At the very least, I think one of the mini. They did a whole range of mini toys that I think were compatible with Skybase that you could get. So yeah, I would imagine the Albatross was done in that range, if nowhere else. But I agree, would make a very good toy. But they never did one that was sort of in scale with this. This is the Corgi Rhino that I have in front of me. And no, they never did an Albatross in that scale. Would have been amazing if they did, but they never did. So anyway, meanwhile, speaking of cool aircraft, Harmony takes a Hummingbird, because they're just showing off all of Spectrum's stuff. All the toys come out.
There's a lot of toys in this episode.
Yeah. So Harmony takes a Hummingbird with Johnson. Cadet Johnson comes in tow.
Yeah,
because she takes a shine to him. This is, by the way, after he's been inexplicably Mysteronized. Again,
very inexplicably.
The green energy of the Mysterons just sort of comes along and kills him.
He's hanging out at a Spectrum training facility, just drinking his coffee, and is abruptly Mysteronized with no warning. It's completely.
it does
out of
just
the
sort of
blue.
come out of nowhere. It is just sort of like, okay, we need to kind of get to the plot. And it would have been nice if they could have engineered a more creative death for him, I suppose, because that's what they would have done in the original series. He would have gotten run over by an aircraft or something would have happened to him. His head would have got sucked into a jet engine or something like that. But maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, because I really don't like the guy. Anyway, so Johnson toes along because Harmony's taken a shine to him of some description, although I think she regrets that quite quickly later on. Now we get to now it's daylight and we see the hummingbird come into land and around the cottage. We get to see more of the Scottish Highlands setting. And this is probably where my main criticism of the episode is, which is the landscape, the textures that are used on the CG elements. Yeah, as you said, PlayStation 2 graphics type of look. It hasn't necessarily. Whereas I think, honestly, the characters and the vehicles are highly, highly detailed and they look amazing. But where the CG looks dated when it comes to new Captain Scarlet is in things like the settings. The things that, honestly, from week to week when they're producing new episodes, they probably just had to churn these things out so quickly. They probably didn't have time to put a ton of detail into them. It probably was like, well, this just has to serve a function and we just have to get through it. So, yeah, if you look at it, I mean, obviously the Scottish Highlands are quite, there's not a lot going on anyway. It is just trees and greenery and things like that. But there is a lack of sort of detail in the ruggedness of the landscape is lacking.
It is. I do live in Scotland, not in the Highlands, but I've seen them in person recently, and they don't quite look the way that they do in reality.
No,
it doesn't. You're quite right. There's a lack of detail. I'm not sure exactly where in the Highlands this is supposed to be, but it doesn't look like anywhere I've seen.
No. It looks quite generic, and that does slightly distract you a little bit. You sort of want to be invested in this new setting of Scottish Highlands. That's interesting. That's different. We haven't had an episode set there. Obviously, so many of the Supermarionation shows are memorable for their Scotland episodes. I think Loch Ness Monster, 30 Minutes Afternoon, Phantom Piper, things like that. They're very memorable. So it's a little more subdued in New Captain Scarlet, which is okay. I think that's fair enough, probably. But you do have some nice Scots accents kind of coming in with a lot of the characters.
They are nice. They're not too over the top. Sometimes
they feel very grounded, very realistic, which I suppose is okay. But yeah, in terms of the landscape, it's not quite as awe-inspiring as maybe one would have hoped. So there we go. But Harmony and Johnson go and talk to Mrs. Mackenzie, and Johnson insists on having a cup of tea because Mrs. Mackenzie offers it. And at that point, Harmony regrets her choice to bring the guy along because he's just holding them up. But he's like,
left banana fingers at home.
Yes. Banana finger. Anyway, he lures Harmony upstairs because he says, I heard a noise. And sure enough, that's the point where Cadet Johnson and Mrs. Mackenzie reveal their true colors, that they are Mysteron agents, and they tie up, Harmony and keep her prisoner in that cottage. So that's going on. Meanwhile, this is what I like. The story keeps going back and forth, back and forth. Meanwhile, Scarlet is at the power station. He's driven his Rhino up to the power station, and he's chatting with the governor, with the boss, who isn't Cockney at all. I don't know why I did a Cockney accent there, but he's a very nice Scots gentleman who basically they do the perfect thing of they talk about why the nuclear reactor is so dangerous, and then they talk about just how well defended it is by all the missiles, all the barriers, everything that they have in place to defend this incredibly dangerous thing. It's a neat bit of dialogue. It's pure exposition, but it is just
It's played
it's just
nicely though.
it's
They
just
play it
quick,
like he's
simple.
yeah.
Yeah,
They play it like he's bragging a bit about his
yeah.
setup, which is
We've got
nice.
some anti-missile missiles. He's very impressed with that. I love the way that line
It
is
feels a
delivered.
bit character driven for an exposition, so it's well delivered.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's very nice. And then I'm trying to remember now. I'm referring to my Lady Penelope notebook, of course, of all my
Of course
notes.
you are.
So then this is the weird thing. This is where again the Mysterons plot and the Spectrum mission all get a bit blurry, and like you don't really know when things are going right and when they're going wrong. So Mackenzie and Johnson force Harmony to transmit a message to Skybase saying everything's fine, no need to worry, all is well.
Right.
But Harmony uses the emergency daily code word, which is A-OK, to mean everything is not A-OK, send help, there's an emergency.
Right.
And then, having transmitted that message, Cadet Johnson goes, well, obviously she used a code word. We're totally expecting that she used a code word to signal that there was something wrong.
This was part of the plan.
But that was part of the whole plan in the first place. But the way they talk about it is as if maybe she wouldn't have done that, or maybe she would. I don't know. But anyway, it seems like everything's going according to plan anyway.
Yeah.
Because
I agree. It's a bit of a weird bump because they leave her tied up, but then they come back together just like, and it's only been like a minute of screen time. And you're like, why?
It moves a bit too quickly. It definitely does. There's a sense of
problem there.
Yeah, only a tiny bit, but yeah, it's just a little bit odd. Then, alerted to the danger, Scarlet takes his Rhino up to the cottage to go and investigate further, and he comes across Mrs. Mackenzie, and she's doing the sweet old lady act, I suppose, and wants to he insists on having a look around the cottage, and there's that lovely scene where he really wants to go and look in the bedroom, and she's like, oh no, I haven't even made my bed yet. That's my terrible version of doing the accent.
It sounded just like her.
I know. And Scarlet's like, oh well, I've seen messy bedrooms before, I have a messy bedroom myself. I'm like, yes, of course you do.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a nice difference between new Captain Scarlet and original Captain Scarlet, is you do have those moments where the characters can be cheeky and a little bit imperfect and just more down to earth and real.
Wayne Forrester's Captain Scarlet is way warmer and way more approachable than Francis.
He's lovely.
Like austere kind of no nonsense Captain Scarlet.
Exactly that.
I much prefer Wayne's version of it personally.
Yeah. But yeah, Mrs. Mackenzie is doing that clever thing of arousing suspicion unnecessarily, because she opens the bedroom door and there's nothing in there because they've moved Harmony down to the basement. Which again, it's like, well, how did Scarlet check the basement? Did they do a swap halfway through? How did they get Harmony down the stairs without Scarlet noticing while going up the anyway? But
don't explore any of that. That's quickly passed over.
The point is that Scarlet does not find Harmony, even though her Hummingbird helicopter is still parked outside. Meanwhile, Scarlet goes to leave, and Mackenzie and Johnson are like, well, where's the Rhino? Where's he parked it? Oh no, we didn't get our Rhino after all. And Mackenzie's like, I know what to do. And starts this it's a bit of a bizarre sequence where she drives her beaten up old car straight out of the garage. Driving along looking like an absolute maniac. It's like, you didn't really need to look like that. I get you're trying to cause a scene and try and cause a diversion that will trick Scarlet into bringing the Rhino out into the open and think, I should pursue this. Which
it had to get far enough ahead to set a trap.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I guess that's it. She's driving like a maniac in order to speed up, I suppose. Anyway, the trap for the Rhino is set when she gets out of the car, lies on the ground, and Scarlet comes along, gets out of the Rhino, investigates. They have a bit of an altercation, which ultimately results in Johnson stealing the Rhino and Mrs. Mackenzie falling off a cliff. Bye bye,
It's
Mrs.
quite scary.
Mackenzie.
She's quite scary as a villain when she like he comes over to her and he's
Yeah,
like, "Are you all right?" And there's some moments in this episode where you're not quite sure because we don't see her becoming Mysternized. We know that she does, but she's
yeah,
quite nice when she appears with Harmony, and then suddenly she'll punch her, or like in this case, she suddenly uses her cane to trip Scarlet. It's quite scary.
right.
She's quite
That's
a
one of the
frightening character.
great. I mean, that's one of the great strengths of new Captain Scarlet in general is when those Mysteron agents are much more subtle. Let's say that they actually feel like they can still function as real people, but then the Mysteron influence takes over them and they turn into absolute monsters and they, will fight and kill,
Yes,
whereas
much more
obviously
vicious.
in the original series, they're just played monotone, they barely speak, if you were to have a conversation with a Mysteron agent, you would usually know about it. There are exceptions to that. Actually, the two guys in Special Assignment are some of the
Are pretty
more
exceptional. That's true.
they're kind of with it as Mysteron agents, whereas some of the
They
others,
are.
it's like
They're not
don't
quite as
engage them in
zombified.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah,
zombified. That's the word exactly. Yeah.
that's quite right.
But yeah, so
R.I.P.
Johnson's got
Mrs. Mackenzie.
Johnson's got the Rhino, and in case I didn't like the guy anymore, he gets sort of this weird maniacal look in his eyes. The more he's driving that SPV, the Rhino throughout the episode, he gets this big grin on his face. There's actually, again, in the original script, he was supposed to actually be replaced by a robot replicant, and there would have
Ooh.
been a whole bit where Scarlet ripped his head off. But he would have kept on driving because he's a robot and things like that. Yeah, very weird. I think it's better. The version we ended up with was a lot better, but it's interesting to know that that's where they were kind of going with it. But anyway, fortunately, Destiny in her Falcon Interceptor is sort of in the general area. She's about. So they divert her to help bring down this Rhino before it inevitably goes and drives into the power station. And then Scarlet also takes off in Harmony's Hummingbird. It's actually really clever. All these little things are kind of set up and placed. It's like, okay, well, now there's a Hummingbird going spare back at the cottage, so I'll go and hop in that. And then, I mean, basically the rest of the episode is the chase, down from the cottage, taking these winding roads, which again don't look very well detailed.
But it's okay in the chase because they go by in motion
so quickly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't notice, but yeah. But you have the various stages that then the Rhino kind of is driving towards the security gate, and there's that lovely moment with the security guard sort of looking a bit uncertain about it, and then it's looming closer and closer, and it's like, oh dear, we're in trouble. Rhino crashes through the gates. The Hummingbird is trying to open fire on it, but the Rhino's defenses are so, it's a tough beast. So, the Hummingbirds, I think it's like a machine cannon or something like that, is trying to open fire on it. And that doesn't succeed. They put up all these, then it's like sirens wailing. You've got barriers coming up across this long stretch of road leading up to the reactor at the end of it. It's very neatly framed and set up. Again, you get a nice sense of the scale of the whole thing, where the Rhino sort of starts out as a small speck in the distance, and over the course of the sequence, it looms much larger in the whole thing. Let's see, it tries to fire missiles at the reactor, but the anti-missile missiles that were boasted about earlier come into play and take those out. And it just keeps building and building and building and building. Destiny tries. What happens to Harmony? Harmony's just sort of left in the basement, isn't she?
Yeah, they kind of left her behind.
Yeah. Well, hopefully someone went back for her at the end of it, but it's not a priority. Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to say was Destiny flies in with her Falcon, again tries to open fire on the Rhino, but doesn't succeed in doing that. And it basically gets right up to the last minute, and this Rhino is falling apart at this point. Like, it has taken a beating, but it's still going. And maybe there's a little bit of Mysteron energy kind of going on. It's left kind of ambiguous as to what's going on exactly, but Johnson, with this maniacal grin on his face, is driving forward and forward and forward, and you see all this electricity going on around him. Like, everything inside the Rhino is breaking. And it literally gets right up to the last point, and Scarlet's sort of like, Destiny, get out, because this is about to quite literally go nuclear. And Scarlet, in a last-ditch attempt, using his wonderful indestructible abilities, which aren't necessarily used in every episode of New Captain Scarlet, but they're definitely employed here. Scarlet crashes his hummingbird directly into the Rhino to try and stop it. Succeeds. Obviously, in doing so, he destroys the Rhino and the hummingbird in the process. So
it's quite a bang.
Big, spectacular explosion. Scarlet gets thrown from the wreckage. She's still alive, but clearly injured. Destiny somehow has enough room to land her Falcon Interceptor inside the grounds of the nuclear power station, which I can kind of see it. It kind of works, but
the complex that the reactor is within, it's such a large space that not only does it take a good long time for an SPV going at top speed to reach the end of the line where the reactor is.
Yeah.
But you can, in fact, land a fighter jet in the space in between the
Very
gate
convenient.
and the reactor.
Yeah.
It's great.
It must be a pain in the work. It must be a pain getting to work in the morning. You arrive at the front gate and you go, right, I've still got to walk an hour to get to my office, which is at the other side. You have to arrive at the crack of dawn just to be at your desk in time for work.
Wish I had one of those moving walkways from the original series.
Well, exactly. So much faster. They definitely would have had that. Anyway, and then we get to the end of the episode, which I don't know how I feel about it, but the dialogue goes, Destiny scoops up the wounded Captain Scarlet in her arms.
Yes.
And he looks up at her, covered in blood, and says, am I in heaven? No, Paul, you're here in my arms. And Scarlet says, that's what I mean. And the episode ends there. And we're all sick. We all throw up. I mean, it is cheesy. It is cheesy. It does push it a little too far.
Perhaps, given it's sort of a hard swing in a different direction after an episode that's been kind of nonstop. And then suddenly there's like a nice touching moment, and you're like, it sort of feels out of place. There's nothing to set it up. It just doesn't quite
other than what we already know about Destiny and Paul's relationship throughout the series. But it's actually weird how little screen time. It's actually interesting. This is one of those episodes which doesn't have a whole lot of characters in it. Captain Blue's absent. Lieutenant Green certainly doesn't have a lot to do. They're trying to go kind of thin on the ground with characters. Gives Harmony more to do, which I think is really nice. Although, as we say, she sort of does get forgotten about by the end of the episode. But it's fine. At least she's given something to do. So, and it evolves that kind of Spectrum world a little bit more by seeing the flight school and cadets. And even though Cadet Johnson, as I say, is not a very likable person, it's interesting to see those extensions, kind of like in the original series. You get things like Koala Base in the episode Traitor, and the hovercrafts and the training school that comes with that. So it's nice to see those little slices of here's Spectrum, but in a slightly different way to what you might normally see.
It gives it a bit of scale to see it around the world.
Exactly.
So that's a very nice thing. The action sequence at the end, I think, is one of the strongest ones in the series. It's very memorable. It's worthy of Mad Max for all the action and the
Yeah.
crashes and the
The Rhino just
shenanigans.
keeps taking the punishment and gets to show off every single bit of its
It
equipment.
does.
You know, the battering rams come out, the missiles will come out. It's all going on.
If you're looking for a
Yeah.
promise of the premise as far as the Rhino's abilities, this is a good candidate.
Yes,
The
definitely.
only ability that doesn't really get showcased is one that gets shown off in another episode called Best of Enemies, I believe is the name of it.
Yeah,
Where it falls underwater. And that's a very good episode for the Rhino as well.
it's
But
very
this is
good. Yeah.
definitely the Rhino's finest hour as far as showing off everything it can do. And it's quite, it's always great to see in this and in Special Assignment the technology that the heroes use turned against them.
Yeah.
It's always an interesting premise. I love when they
It,
do it.
it's great, and I have to say it done. Well, the interesting thing is, I think actually Special Assignment does it in a more creative way, in that they know that in order to, because it's not just in Trap for a Rhino, all they need is, okay, get person inside of Rhino and we'll be able to do our mission. Whereas in
Yeah,
Special Assignment, they go through this whole thing of we need to get Captain Scarlet on side so that he can acquisition the SPV, which he doesn't even end up doing. He just punches the guy in the face. But it's just an extra layer added to the story for Special Assignment that isn't
that's
there in
true.
Trap for a Rhino.
That's true. And there is another episode of New Captain Scarlet. I think it might be Best of Enemies, in fact, where Captain Black tries to drive an SPV and
Yeah, and he's locked out.
he's locked
Yeah.
out. He can't do it. And so it's a bit incredulous to imagine that this guy Johnson can just hop into an SPV or a Rhino rather and start driving it.
Because it's specifically mentioned that he's never driven one before.
Right.
But he's keen to get behind the wheel of one.
He is.
Which is nice actually, because it gives you a taster of what the plot is. Because unlike original Captain Scarlet, we don't get the Mysteron threat at the beginning, so we don't know for sure what the Mysteron's going to try to do. But I mean, the title of the episode is Trap for a Rhino, and you've got a giant nuclear power station, so it's pretty obvious what they're going to try and do. But you just get a little flavor of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I wish there had been a bit more cleverness to that the trap part of the Trap for a Rhino. Whereas it feels like something they improvised at the last minute.
It's not much of a trap. It's not much of a trap, and the fact that Scarlet falls for it is a little bit. Yeah. It's a bit weak. It's a bit convenient.
I enjoy the like old lady with super strength because we forgot to mention in the fight scene with Harmony, where Harmony realizes that Johnson is a Mysteron agent. They have a bit of a fight sequence, and she kicks his butt. Like she wins that fight easily. But then the old lady comes in, and Mrs. McKenzie kicks Harmony's butt. So she's clearly like a super Mysteron.
It's sort of like, I was going to say the Mysterons have sort of overcompensated in a way. They're like, oh, well, it's this little old lady, so we need to give her a bit more Mysteron energy. And in doing so, they actually give her more than anyone else. So she becomes suddenly, as you say, like a super Mysteron. She's the most powerful. And in doing so, sort of loses her mind entirely when that happens as well. It's great. Yeah, it turns her into this, very vicious monster type character.
She's sort of in the tradition of like Zelda, of being like a sort of like a very evil old lady villain.
Yeah, scary old ladies. Scary. You can't go wrong with a scary old lady living in a cottage up in the Scottish Highlands. As something just. It's very straightforward, but it works. It really does work. So yeah. So I would have to say my pick between these two episodes would be Trap for a Rhino. And I see what Special Assignment tries to do. Like you say, I enjoy that theme of, hey, let's turn Spectrum's machinery against them. I think that's great. I just think Trap for a Rhino does it in a more succinct, stylish, exciting. It's more exciting kind of way.
Yeah. I think where Special Assignment is kind of a middle of the road episode of Captain Scarlet. Trap for a Rhino is a more, it's a higher ranking episode of New Captain Scarlet for sure.
Yeah.
It's more towards the top 10, if not in the top 10 itself, for most people, and for me as well. So it definitely is my preferred to watch of these two episodes.
Are there any? I'm trying to think back about original Captain Scarlet episodes. Are there any that maybe showcase the SPV slightly better? That maybe we could have maybe. I mean, obviously thematically these episodes are so similar, so it made sense to pair them together. But I'm wondering if you were going for purely showcasing the vehicle's abilities, is there something where the SPV maybe comes out slightly stronger? I'm thinking maybe something like Winged Assassin, although it does crash at the end of that, or Fire at Rig 15.
Yep.
Also does crash at the end of that, but
both of those are quite nice. I think a lot about when I think about the SPV, I think about it in Avalanche, which isn't an episode where it gets to do too much, but just seeing it in the elements of
it's one of the more exciting reveals, I think, where
coming out of the log cabin.
The log cabin. There you go. Let's finish on that. What is your favorite SPV reveal?
It might be that one. It might be the oil tank in the trap. Actually, the other Scottish episode in Captain Scarlet. It comes out of original Captain Scarlet. It comes out of a whiskey distillery, which I love.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard to choose. I think the log cabin may be the best because it does explode. Like the log cabin.
Exactly. Kind of it's like, well, that log cabin is no more. That's never going to be used again. And that's a real shame. I like the one just because it is so nothing particularly spectacular happens, but I think it's 0.783 when it just drives out of that sort of it's like an Arabian marketplace. It just drives straight through it. And it's just hidden. It's not even hidden that well. It's just inside a building, and it just drives out and plows through all these market stalls and stuff like that. I'm just like, oh, that's quite unceremonious, but it's I don't know. It's different. It's special.
Another potential candidate is Manhunt, where that's sort of similar to this one, where they think it's Captain Black driving, and they have to stop the SPV. It turns out not to be Captain Black. It turns out to be one of the Angels. Similar energy to this episode, where it's like, oh, the SPV is on the loose, and we have to stop it.
Yeah. I will say though, the SPV, as much as the guy getting punched in the face is very memorable in Special Assignment, the actual reveal of the SPV is not that exciting. It's literally just it's under the ground, and then the thing moves up the elevator.
Yeah, and it's quite similar to the Mysterons, where it just is at a service station, which is kind of.
But that's inside of a truck, though. It's like and the truck explodes. You get that great reveal. I think for the first episode, that's a really good reveal. I think that gets it across brilliantly. It's very memorable.
It is.
Yeah, the caravan it's inside a caravan in Winged Assassin, isn't it? Pretty sure.
So. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. So I have to. Yeah, it's a wonderful idea, and I think the SPV is definitely memorable for all of those reasons. But in terms of episodes where the starring vehicle kind of gets used against the enemy, I've got to say, Trap for a Rhino would be my pick, and it sounds like it's yours as well.
It is. Who knew? We actually we came into this as a war of nerves, and we left as friendship of nerves.
I don't think the war lasted very long, to be honest. It wasn't
agreement of nerves.
Exactly a bitter debate, was it? I think we pretty much arrived fairly quickly at the fact that Trap for a Rhino was a more interesting episode than Special Assignment.
I mean, it's always tough when you're talking about a remake. There's always going to be people are always going to prefer the original to some extent, and I think that's true with the SPV versus the Rhino. It's hard for people to give up the nostalgia of the SPV, but I think New Captain Scarlet is such an underrated show, I think
It
every
is.
Gerry Anderson fan should watch it. And
Yes.
like myself, a lot of people put off watching it and don't get around to it until later on in their Anderson viewing journey. So if
Yeah.
you're waiting on your sign to watch New Captain Scarlet, this is it.
Yeah.
It's time to
Oh,
watch it.
I think it is definitely. I mean, yeah, this is a classic case where, yeah, there are, to anyone who doubts it, there are episodes of New Captain Scarlet that are better, more entertaining, more interesting than episodes of original Captain Scarlet. Even if you inherently prefer one style over the other, in
Yeah.
terms of the stories that are being told, they are, there is debate to be had there about which is better, because some are
Yeah.
stronger than
Agreed.
others, and da 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 da. But yeah, it's definitely, if you even took original Captain Scarlet out of the equation altogether, New Captain Scarlet just as a TV series was so ambitious. The types of stories that it tells are wonderful. Like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
People should watch it.
Well,
People should absolutely watch it, even if you're like, oh, I hate CGI, and oh, they shouldn't have done it with CGI and all this sort of stuff.
yeah.
Ah,
Which
it,
may even be true. It might have been more interesting if it had been done some different way. But that's, all of that to one side. The writing is well worth it just for the scripts alone. I
exactly,
mean, and the
exactly.
characters are great. There's some great voice work.
Yep,
It's just a lovely piece of
yep. It's a
work.
good
So
fun. It's good fun. Yep,
go check
absolutely.
it out.
Yeah, go check it out. Well, that was our show, everybody. Thank you all
Woo!
very much for watching. It's been lovely to see all your comments come along while we've been live broadcasting. Lots of discussion going on about, what's wrong with PlayStation 2 graphics as Countdown to Zero and things like that. Which I can't deny. There is a certain part of me that also does go, yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind that it looks like PlayStation 2 graphics. There is a certain charm to that as well.
I
So,
know what you mean. I know what you mean.
yeah,
There's a lot to be said
yeah.
for in this era when we could be making anything with our computer graphics, we are making the Minecraft movie, which is just like a bunch of pixels
Wow,
rendered
that
in
is a
high resolution.
whole that is a whole other debate for another day. I
It
don't know
is
how we can do an episode that ties that back to Gerry Anderson, but yes, maybe we could have a.
the Gerry Anderson Minecraft crossover episode.
Well, yeah, people do it though. Anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a whole other thing. So anyway, thank you everyone for watching and listening. You can of course find the Security Hazard Show across all your favorite podcast platforms now. But the best way to watch, in our opinion, is you can watch us live on YouTube every Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. UK time. Head over to the Jack Knoll YouTube channel and you can subscribe there and watch us every single week. You can also follow us on social media. The Facebook page is facebook.com/unofficial Gerry Anderson blog. You can also follow me on Blue Sky at Jack Knoll and also on X at Security Hazard. You can email the podcast sec.hazard.pod@gmail.com with any of your thoughts and feelings, and we enjoy reading those. Ben, where can people find you on this
You
here
can
internet?
find me. benwolf.page is my website that links to all of my different projects. I have a blog about Starfleet called xblogger, starfleetxbomber.substack.com. I have a Patreon where I give behind the scenes updates on the puppet film that I'm making, inspired by Captain Scarlet, among other things. It's called patreon.com/astralbeacon. So you can look up Astral Beacon on Patreon and find it there. Where else am I? I'm on X as at Cinemarionette. I'm on YouTube as Cinemarionette. That's cinema and marionette put together. So you can find me there. Please do subscribe to see the 48-hour film that Jack and I made in due course.
Yep.
Yeah, we're all over the place, and be sure to support the show if you want to back us up. You can do that on Ko-fi. Jack has a Ko-fi page set up. That is the
Yep.
best way to sponsor the show.
Yes,
that we
give
couldn't
what
do
you
it
can, but
without.
only please if you can. Even a little bit goes a very long way. So yeah,
Yes.
ko-fi.com/Jack Null is the place to go for that. Also worth mentioning, of course, the Security Hazard blog where all of this kicked off, securityhazard.net.
Yes.
Head over there. If you're not subscribed to that, I'm just going to say, like, basically, I'm ramping up towards something.
Something big is coming.
Something big is coming for the Security Hazard blog in the coming weeks. So
I'm so excited, Jack. I'm so
you're
excited
excited.
about it. I can't wait for this big project to be revealed.
Thank you for bigging it up for me. I really do appreciate that. But otherwise, we will see you next week. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye for now.
SIG. SIG.